and terrific. They did well. They might have started the whole thing. I don't know. I don't know if that court case was proper, but they were very nice, both of them.
Absolutely.
Really nice guys.
And I think maybe this is a good place to start in our conversation is, one of the things I think we heard a lot at that dinner was just the difficulty that people in business were having under this Biden administration. You got the crypto guys who just want a framework. They just want the government to tell them how to operate, and they can't get that. You got no M&A happening right now in tech. The real estate guys, they can't get loans because the interest rates are through the roof and there's a credit crunch. So I think one of the common themes we just heard across that dinner was that it was just so hard to do business right now. And I guess maybe a good place to start would just be, what's the number one thing, or maybe the top three things that you would do to kind of get things moving again, if you're reelected?
So I'd say regulation, and taxes, okay? I gave the biggest tax cut in the history of our country, and a lot to business. It took it down from, look, as you know, they were paying companies were paying 40%, 45%, including state and city taxes in many cases. And we got it down to 21%. We'd like to get it down lower, actually, but we got it down, and the revenues were better than ever, even with the lower rate. We had a record revenues, which tells you a little bit about that. But also the regulations. And when I asked a lot of people, a lot of big people, a lot of corporate types, big corporate types, I said, if you had your choice between just the taxes or just the regulations, where did I do better? He said, the regulations. I was the biggest cutter of in 4 years, I cut more regulations than anybody by far, not even close. And when I spoke to different people about the regulation versus the taxes, I don't think I've ever had anybody say, and the taxes were a massive cut, from 37, 38%, if you look at it just there, to 21%. I don't think I ever had anybody say that the taxes were more important than the regulation cuts. I made it possible to build, I made it possible to do things, to invest. I was able to get companies with a lot of money outside of the USA to bring that money back in. We cut the rate, and it was crazy. The rate was like 55%, so that means if they bring the money back, they lose half their money before they even start. But it was also impossible from a standpoint, a structural standpoint, a legal standpoint. It was very hard. And they were able to bring back, Apple's an example. They brought hundreds of billions of dollars back from other countries into the United States and invested it here. So, but it's very interesting because I ask the question all the time, which was more important? And almost everybody said I did an even better job. And I got the biggest tax cuts. The biggest tax cuts, bigger than the Reagan tax cuts, but they found regulations, and the regulation cuts were even more effective. And that's where we had the great economy, and that's where we had the most jobs ever produced.
So there's this odd thing that happens in certain states where taxes keep going up, and then you start to see the states break, right? Productivity breaks, crime goes up, and quality of life goes down. But then people don't understand that taxation and all of those things are correlated. Do you have an idea of why that is? Like, why don't people understand universally that lower taxation is better for productivity?
Well, they don't understand it, and it's such an interesting question because you look at some of these places like Chicago and New York and LA and so many more. I'd hate to even mention the three because there are worse examples than that. You look at what's happened in Oakland, and you look at what's happened into some cities that are disappearing. They're literally just crime waves. Nobody lives there except for criminals because you can't live there. You can't survive there. Physically, you can't survive there. And when you look at the kind of crime that we're talking about, and then they take the power away from the police can't do anything. If they do anything to stop it, they end up losing their pension, their house, their family. They end up losing everything. They get put in jail. And we're not talking about the rogue cops who do something really bad and should be taken care of badly. Be nasty. You got to be nasty to them also. But mostly, these people, they want to really, like 99%, they want to stop crime. They hate to see it. They're not allowed to they're told not to do anything. When you see a department store that was so proud, they opened up a new store in a certain city, and all of a sudden, over the last couple of years has happened, this phenomena where 500 usually young people walk into the store and take everything. They have masks on, They walk out with television sets, air conditioners. They walk out with everything. This is a new phenomenon that's taken place, and it's incredible. Look at drugstores. Look at what's going on. Like in New York, you walk into a chain. I've seen it twice. I don't walk into too many drugstores, but I used to love it. I used to love to walk around and just look at what it is, whether it's a drugstore or a department store. But they told me just a little while ago, I had a meeting with some people, and they say you walk into a drugstore in New York, and everything's covered up with bars and glass, and if you want just a little thing of aspirin, or if you want to buy a toothbrush, you have to wait a half an hour to get a clerk, and they open up this vault and they give you a toothbrush, or they give you, how do you do business like that? This is a phenomenon. There's never been anything like this. They didn't used to have theft of even the most minor items. They had very little theft, relatively speaking. They didn't have theft. But they had the police would arrest them if they did something. Today they don't. They have limits sometimes. If you steal less than $2,000, you don't get arrested. So nobody steals more than $2,000. It's incredible when you see what's happened to the quality of life in our country. And it's happened so quickly. It's taken place so rapidly. Nobody's ever seen anything. But you look at retail, and I know the big deal. It used to be a big deal when a department store moved into a city, or a certain store opened up even in a town. But it's usually the Democrat-run big cities where this problem is taking place. And I don't say that as a Republican. I just say you look at the 25 cities, the top problems, they're just about all Democrat. They're Democrat-run.
And they're also high tax, high regulation states.
Yeah, no cash bail, all of these different things that have taken place. They're phenomena. It's a phenomena. What's going on? Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And it has to be stopped. It's a horrible quality of life. And on top of that, you can't walk to a store. You end up getting shot or mugged or something. The level of crime in the cities, in these big cities, is out of control. Nobody has ever seen anything like it.
Mr. President, can I just ask, on your point about the tax cuts, Larry Summers made a comment the other day, and I thought maybe you could respond to his tweet that the tax cuts coupled with the tariffs that you've proposed would cause a massive, I think he called it the mother of all stagflation, where you would have kind of inflation because of the tariffs, you would have economic decline because more money would start to fund an increase in prices with tax coming down, tax cuts being put in place. Can you maybe just comment on the comment made by Larry Summers and how we implement tax cuts without inflation?
Well, let me say that I respect Larry Summers a lot. He's been right about a lot of things, and Obama and Biden have been wrong. Certain things that he said turned out to be true, certain things. And I do have a good respect for him. He's a different kind of a guy, and he speaks his mind. I happen to be a big believer in tariffs because I think tariffs give you two things. They give you economic gain, but they also give you political gain. If a country is out of control and something having nothing to do with economics or having nothing to do with money coming in or money going out, but other things that are very political, because there are a lot of other things involved in countries, you have tremendous power over a country. Now, not everybody can say that, but we can because we're the big piggy bank. But our piggy bank is going to get smaller and smaller all the time because we're losing power. We're losing a lot of, countries on the dollar. I mean, they're going like flies. If we ever lose that, that's the equivalent of losing a war. That would be that would really make us third world. We have lost so many countries. I looked the other day. So Russia's gone. You take a look. Ukraine doesn't sort of exist in a sense. Nobody knows what's going on there. But when you look at China is essentially gone. They're trying to get out of it. They're a primary competitor. Iran is not there. The other day I read where Saudi Arabia is willing to now go in various different currencies instead of the dollar. This is a tragedy. This is a big thing that's happening against our country, and we cannot let that happen. With tariffs, it gives you a tremendous power, as an example, not to let that happen. You say, you want to do that? We're going to put tariffs on your product coming into the United States. But more importantly, and that's a big importance, but probably of more importance is they tax us, we tax them, reciprocal trade. I think we should have a reciprocal trade act. If China's going to charge us $100 tariff or 100% tariff on a car, then we should say, you're going to pay 100% to us. I put on a large tariff on China cars coming in, and it had a huge impact, a huge positive impact. And Biden only is doing the electric cars. I don't know why that is, because the electric cars, they're going to end up all being made in China, by the way. They're not going to be made here. The United Auto Workers are going to take a blow like no unions ever. Between that and people coming in, pouring into our country, unions are getting absolutely decimated. Absolutely.
President Trump.
But the reciprocal act is, I think, a very important thing when these countries, and I don't mean just China, we have other countries. You could take the European Union. They don't want our farm product, and they don't want our cars, and they don't want anything. We have a massive deficit right there. But you could go with many countries, and they essentially do things to us, and we should do things to them. Basically, it should be reciprocal.
One of the things we've talked about, President Trump, on this podcast a lot is the deficit. Under your administration, we added close to $8 trillion. Under Biden, it's going to be paradoxically about the same number. Seems incredibly unpopular in Washington to cut costs, but that's something we're going to need to do. What's your plan? And it looks like you're going to win a second term here. What's your plan in your second term to control spending? Can you get it under control? Is there the will in Washington to allow you to do that?
Well, the biggest thing I think is growth, because we can grow our way out. As an example, we have more liquid gold under our feet. I use the term. We have more oil. We have more wells. We have more everything than anybody else. When I started, we were number 3. Now we're number 1. We were number 1. He's going to keep it that way until after the election. If they ever won the election, there's no more oil coming out. There's no more oil. They were going down. Oil is what caused the inflation. You'd have nothing coming out. It would be a disaster. So they were intelligent enough to let the oil wells continue to go. They're not happy about it. But if this election were won by them, I can tell you right now, we would see oil go through the roof because they would really close it up. Already they're taking out of the strategic reserves just for politics because they want to try and keep the prices down as low as possible. But the big thing, we have tremendous growth potential, and we have tremendous numbers of dollars that can be saved through efficiency. The way we're spending money, hundreds of billions of dollars, what Biden did with the trillions of dollars that he borrowed for COVID. Now, I had a different situation. We were getting ready to start paying off debt. We were getting ready to make a lot. We had the greatest economy in history. I had to throw a lot of money at COVID in order that we didn't end up in a 1929 type depression, which we could still end up in now because of what they've done. But I threw a lot of money in, and we ended up not in a depression. And then we ended up with a very strong, I ended up with a higher stock market than it was just previous to COVID coming in, which was pretty much of a miracle according to most. But we had to throw money out there in order to keep our country going. We would have ended up, if I didn't do that, we would have ended up in a depression. The problem is, when Biden came in, he took trillions and trillions of dollars for COVID. He didn't use it for COVID, he used it for other things, but he took trillions of dollars out, and that caused a lot of the inflation. His energy policies caused inflation, and his spending, the unbelievable spending that they did, caused inflation, tremendous inflation, and it's going to have an impact for a long time to come.
Can you talk about your impoundment authority intention? You mentioned that in the past, that you could go in and reduce the bureaucracy and the spend. I always tell people my position going into the election is less that I'm interested in knowing what the government's going to do for me, and I'm more interested in knowing what the government's going to stop doing that doesn't do any good for anyone. And there seems to be a lot of that. And I'm really curious to hear, sir, how you think about using the impoundment authority vested in you as president of the United States to reduce some of the bureaucracy, wasteful spending, and create accountability. And is there a team that you've built around you to help build a specific plan on backing out of some of these issues?
Right. We have a lot of money floating around that should be brought back into the government, should be given back to DC, to Washington. As you know, there was a lot of money given out over the last couple of years, especially my money was given out to help us with COVID. Then they took money and they have no idea what they're even doing with it. That money can be given back, and it should be given back, and things can be done with that money that are positive. But there are many, many things. I'll give you an example. Education. We spend more on education per pupil than any other country. We spend numbers and yet we're terrible at it. We're down at the bottom of the list, and yet we're at the top of the list. I am going to, very early in the administration, we're going to send education back to the states. We're going to give them approximately half the number of dollars, and they're going to have so much money that like they've never had before. because they can spend a fraction of what we're spending right now and have much better school systems. As an example, you could name many. You go to Nebraska, you go to Iowa, you go to many states, will do a far better job than we're doing right now, and they'll do it for a fraction of the cost. We'll save a tremendous amount of money and have better. Some states, I don't believe will do a very good job, but they're gonna have to learn to. But we have, I would say most of our states will do a much better job. I think all of them will do better than, you can't do worse than what we're doing right now, but all of them will do better. But some will be absolutely education, a factory in a positive sense, factories. We are going to close up education. We'll have a tiny little group to make sure everyone's teaching at least English and perhaps proper math, et cetera, but very little. Department of Education goes, and education goes back to the states and where it belongs. I mean, where it absolutely belongs. And you're going to save a lot of money. You can look at interior with that. You can look at environmental with a lot of that, where the environment can be controlled by the states instead of this big bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. I mean, what do you do when China's burning all the coal and they're sending the ashes over the United States? Because that's what happens. It takes 3.5 days and it blows over the United States. In the meantime, we're keeping things good. We produce clean coal. We're going to produce clean energy, but we have to get back to energy. We're spending trillions of dollars on artificial, weak energy that's not going to fire up our plants. Our plants have to be fired up. We have a phenomena coming up right now, and I was talking about it the other day to David, and that's AI, little things, simple, two little simple letters, but it's big. And I realized the other day, more than any time when we were at David's house and talking to a lot of geniuses from Silicon Valley and other places, they need electricity at levels that nobody's ever experienced before to be successful, to be a leader in AI. The amount of electricity they need is like double what we have right now and even triple what we have right now. It's incredible how much they need to be the leader. And we're going to have to be able to do that. And a windmill turning with its blade, knocking out the birds and everything else is not going to be able to make us competitive. You'll have China.
What about nuclear, Mr. President? Yeah. So let me just give you a statistic on this.
Nuclear is
China's
okay.
building 150 nuclear reactors, and they're only spending about $2,500 a kilowatt. In the U.S., we're not building any, and our cost to build them is about $10,000 a kilowatt. And China's about to build as much capacity as 20% of the total U.S. production in nuclear. We clearly have a problem here in nuclear.
We do, and nuclear is okay with me. And what we're doing is, you know, if you look at Alabama, you look at a couple of states where they built these plants and they had cost overruns that are, nobody's ever seen anything like it, where they're costing $25 billion to build a plant. There were a couple of them built in the South. I won't mention the places, but you know the places. And they came out at numbers that I think the most expensive things ever built in our country. And the inspectors would go in, they say, those walls aren't thick enough, knock them down and build another wall. And, you know, the environmental people were brutal. You know, in France and in other places where they do have a lot of nuclear, they build small plants all the same. And if they need double the amount, they'll build two of them, as opposed to the nonsense that we've done where we build these massive plants and they never get built and they have cost overruns of 300, 400, 500%. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. No, I'm okay with nuclear, but you have to do it in a way that makes sense. And they have nuclear applications today that can be built and can be built reasonably inexpensively. But nuclear certainly is very strong power.